What's up, guys? On this episode, we're going to talk about wrapping up all the plumbing on the motor, and we're also going to build the intercooler piping for it. Tim's going to be coming down here and he's going to weld all that up. Basically, we're going to get this motor ready to fire. We're going to go through everything, make sure everything's there, mount the coil packs on some nice Texas speed billet valve covers that are blank. So we're going to make some threaded bushings that are going to bolt to the valve cover. We're going to drill and tap the valve cover itself. Just a lot of miscellaneous things to make sure that that motor is ready to run. So let's get started. So Tim's out here today. We're going to do some intercooler piping, some fab work.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Tim did a lot of the fab work on this car, and then he's going back to his day job, Mr. Cameraman. What we're gonna do, Tim, is gonna grab all this Treadstone Performance piping. Like this JD looking pipe right here is a good start, and we're just gonna start chopping it up, making it fit. And once we're happy with it, we're gonna have you TIG weld it together. I have a TIG welder, and I suck at TIG welding because I don't ever have time to practice. So Tim's the man, though. He'll get it done. So the top intercooler pipe, I think that one's going to be an easy one. This is a 45 degree, I believe. I got a couple different degrees. This one looks like the 45. So we're going to probably just trim this down. It'll bring this back up here, and then we'll be able to just put a nice 45 coupler here, keep a straight coupler on here. I think that's going to be hopefully the easier one. And I offset my intercooler always to the passenger side to shift weight over as much as possible, and that allows us to run the charge pipe on the inside of the frame rail versus the outside. If I center it up the intercooler, then we'd have to run it on the outside, which I hate doing. That kind of reminds me of like old school SR days where you have the intercooler pipe sticking outside of the frame rails. Carlos probably knows all about that SR life. So we're trying to keep it inside the frame rails and keep it nice and tidy and not allow it to get smashed by something. So Tim, I think I was running this right in there.
Yep.
And then we're gonna keep this 90 degree coupler here. We're gonna weld a 90 degree piece of pipe that comes out 90 here, and then it just has to snake in between this structure and the supercharger bracket right in there. This is kind of big and bulky. If you remove this, the way when we were building this, remember we're snaking this through to make sure we got enough space.
Yep.
And we did a good job at that because this has, plenty of clearance here. So things could flex and move around, and it's not just going to be rubbing. So the hardest part is floating this so it's not rubbing here or here. So it's just kind of floating that right spot. Got a sick ass Treadstone Performance bead roller. So after we're done making all this stuff, we can like bead roll the ends so they're not straight, so the coupler could actually bite on it and it won't slip off, because at 15 psi it'll definitely slip off. So
Where's that thing?
it's right here. Yeah, check this out. So
Check that out.
yeah, this thing's super rad. And, it's
Oh,
really
yeah.
nice quality. Oh jeez. Clamps to the sick ass Boxo workstation right here.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
That's the tube diameter.
Yeah, so that's adjustable. It clenches down on it. Reminds me of my grandma's meat grinder.
Poor grandma.
Yeah, put meat in and so yeah.
Yes, dude. I like that. I want to look at the S14 and see how it's done.
Yeah, that's the cool part about having
Got a mock-up.
the S14 right there, because it's got a Treadstone intercooler on it too. It's got the same Vortec YSI big ass blower on there, and we're gonna plumb it basically the same. So yeah, you could cheat, Tim. Hey, this is a race car, Tim. There's no hinges on here. This is a liftoff.
Jeez, I already forgot.
Yeah, let's put this on the ground, Tim.
Okay.
Let's walk it around. Hinges on a race car.
So it's cut down.
So yeah, this is a great
snakes
example.
through.
The 90 coupler. This looks like less than a 90 that we
It
used.
looks like a 45.
And then
Yeah.
chop
definitely.
weld. Hopefully we can pull it off with just two pieces, man.
Yeah. We should be able to. And then we're gonna weld the blow off dealio.
Yeah, so the blow-off valve is coming in today, and we're using a Vortec blow-off valve. It's going to be a lot bigger than what we got on here. On here is a Turbo Smart Big Bubba.
It's gonna be bigger than that?
It's going to be bigger than that. We're going to have to get creative on that. You know, if worst case, we can actually weld it to the top of the intercooler right here, which would be kind of out of the way. So we'll see. Okay. Yeah, this one's way more complex than what we got going on because we decided to weld a 45 to the actual intercooler, but I want to keep the intercooler off the shelf, man. I want to avoid welding to it, so yeah, that way we can just grab an off the shelf intercooler and put it in. Yep. All right, let's get to it. So it's coming along real good. We're chopping up some pipe. Get these here. Getting very close. It's going good. Just cut some piping. Well, after you cut it, it's kind of a pain because it leaves this crazy chamfer here. So
aluminium.
A bit of a cleanup job afterwards, but it's going together real good. And some more parts showed up. Oh yeah, some stuff from Holly and Vortec. Let's see what's in here. So what we got here is this cute little blow-off valve. This is not small at all. This is ginormous. But hey, this is what it takes to bleed off all that pressure efficiently. So here's the blow-off valve. Here's a V-band that holds the blow-off valve. It's flanged. And I hope there's a flange in here. Yep. There's an aluminum flange. Tim, we got a blow-off valve. We're gonna have to weld that thing on.
Oh yeah.
But we're gonna have to find space for this thing. This thing's
oh wow.
It's she's a big one. So we got this all trimmed up and it's fitting really good. There's gonna be a little bit of space where we need it to have space so it's not rubbing. We don't want the intercooler pipe to rub anywhere on the chassis, so you always have to have some space everywhere. This one's gonna be pretty easy. We just have this as kind of a mock-up piece right here before I cut the actual Treadstone Performance coupler. That's really nice. So want to cut it once and use this kind of as the test dummy. So yeah, that's gonna look sweet. That's gonna be awesome. Here's the Treadstone one that we're gonna cut down a little bit more and make it fit exactly the way we want it to. A little bit of excess left over. And Tim's gonna fire this TIG welder up. We're gonna tack that tube that's on the car, pull it back out and finish welding it, and then figure out where to put this awesome, huge Vortec blow-off valve. I'm thinking we're gonna put it really close to the throttle body this time around, and I'm hoping that will give it a little bit more response, and that's never a bad thing. So we got this tube in. This is the cold side, and for the blow-off valve, this is notched and it'll sit right here. So the top tube's done after we weld this on, and we also need to put an air intake temp sensor, and that's gonna go right there. So we got a threaded bung that's actually a NPT to NPT union. We need to create a bung that Tim could weld on that's gonna house our air intake temp sensor. So I'm gonna take this union and cut it in half and create a bung out of it. Throw this into the lathe real quick and knock it out. Yeah, cut down. So we're gonna machine this down a little bit. We're gonna take this like sharp piece off so it's a nicer surface to weld to. Change the tool out real quick. Oh, let's check it out. There it is. So threading in this way and welding around this little polished top area right there.
Should work good.
Yeah.
Should weld nice. Old John, hey buddy.
How's it going there?
What's going down?
Just working along, setting some preload.
What are these for?
These are for 2G DSM.
Very nice.
Tim, give me my camera back. What are you doing, man? All right, let's roll. Let's get this bung that we made for you. I think we're gonna have to like notch this a little bit to fit the round tube.
All right, cool.
Over here, let me see that. Oh, look at that. What? Let me try that. So you push this in, yeah. Whoa. Man, that's a comfortable looking chair, Tim. You got some Lucas Oil 7590.
Best chair I've sat on in a minute.
So we got the intercooler piping all done. Tim welded this up. We test fitted on the car. We know it works. And literally this is it. So this is from the intercooler to the throttle body, from the supercharger to the intercooler. And we're using Treadstone Performance intercooler piping, Treadstone Performance silicone couplers. This is the one that goes through the throttle body. It's got like this little hip in here, so it's a little more flexible and move around. I like using silicone couplers instead of like weld-on V-bands and clamps that are sturdy, because if you get hit in the front intercooler area or if anything gets tweaked on the front of the car, there's a little bit of give, especially with this style of intercooler coupler right here. There's definitely a little bit of movement, a little bit of give. Say that's not bad for the first speed roll ever. It looks amazing. This tool is super, super easy to use. Stoked on it. Here's what the piping looks like after bead rolling, and this one in this region after welding was discolored a little bit, so I went ahead and hit it with Scotch-Brite, and now it's a matte finish instead of polish, but I think it looks good. The upper intercooler pipe is still polished, and I just cleaned that up, and the bead roll looks really solid. This came out great, and this will keep the silicone couplers on there without having to go crazy on these clamps. It'll have a good positive engagement and shouldn't slip even with the 15 pounds of boost that we run on the car. I prefer to use the OEM water pump. So this is just an AC Delco factory water pump, and we pulled out the ports that go to the heater, and now we're tapping them. One's a 3/8, the other one's a 1/2 inch. I'm gonna tap them, and then we could put in like pipe thread plugs in there or AN lines in there, whatever we want. We don't have to run like a hose that slips on there. Some people like to weld it up, but I don't really like welding to the stock cast pump, so just tapping it is pretty easy because you literally pull those bungs out and you don't have to drill it. You just run a tap right into it. 3/8 and 1/2 inch. Also, this is a top OEM radiator hose bung. We kind of smashed it pulling it out, but it literally just pulls out. I'll show you later where it comes out of. And then I put this CBM Motorsports piece that's billet, and it's machined to press right inside of the water pump. Actually right in there. Getting the plumbing all sorted. We're putting some final touches on it. So here's the coolant hose coming from the back from the radiator. I am running a stock thermostat. So this is a billet thermostat adapter to -16, which runs all the way back. And we press this -16 fitting right into the factory pump. Very OEM right here. And then obviously this is going back to the radiator. and we're using AN lines instead of hoses and clamps because it's just a lot more reliable. So Carlos is whipping this Earl's fitting right onto this Earl's hose, and we got most of the accessories on here, including the oil filter housing. We got the oil cooler here. It's an Earl's oil cooler, really nice unit. So we got to put everything, we got to plumb everything together because we got all the pieces. And this is kind of interesting right here. So this is a T because the AccuSump needs to run into the oil system, and this is a one-way valve. If you run an AccuSump without a one-way valve, it's kind of not doing anything at all. And the reason we have a one-way valve is so that way only allows the AccuSump to pressurize the oil galleries and all the high pressure side of the oil system. So really important to put a one-way valve in when you're putting an AccuSump in, and study the LS1 oil pathway. There's tons of diagrams online. Make sure you plumb it so that the one-way valve is facing the right direction and that it's not switched, because otherwise you could have a really bad failure right on startup. So we gotta make sure that we get that right. So as the oil gets picked up out of the oil pan right down there, it goes through this little mesh, kind of like a pre-filter, and that picks up big pieces of your motor that might come apart that shouldn't be down in the oil pan, but it traps it. And then I like the oil to go directly from this through the oil pump right into my oil filter, and then from the oil filter it can go into the oil cooler. You don't want stuff to get trapped in your oil cooler, so try to make sure that the oil goes through the filter first. And from there on, it's pretty straightforward. We'll get all this plumbed up and show you what it looks like after it's all connected together. We got most of the accessories on and most of the plumbing done. So here's the Earl's oil cooler. It's plumbed. The water lines are plumbed to the pump. We got the breathers still that need to go to the valve covers, and I'm actually working on the valve covers. They're really nice Texas Speed billet valve covers, but I don't want to remotely mount my coils. I actually want to mount them to the valve cover. So I kind of laid out where I want them to go, and you can see I made provisional marks of where I'd want the valve or the holes or bungs to go on the valve cover in order to land the coil packs. So we're gonna pull this out. Ooh, check our valve train, by the way. Solid lifter, and you could rev these things really high, so very excited about that. So here's the valve cover. We're gonna go ahead and actually take a ruler to it. These are just provisional marks. I'm gonna actually space them equal distance apart, make sure that they're centered on the valve cover, that they're not floating up too high or down too low. And this thing's pretty thick. You can tell it steps down right there. It's a really thick piece, so I'm hoping that I actually just drill into it, not through it, and then tap it and machine some risers in order to mount those nice MSD coil packs. So I got some standoffs here that are a little too long, but it's a good starting point. These would make the coil pack sit way too high. I decided that I want these to be 1 inch long, so I got a set of calipers and I got it measured to 1 inch, and what I'm doing is I'm just literally just scribing it right here. So that little scribe mark is all I need. I'm gonna scribe 4 of them for now, cut them down on the lathe, bolt up the coil packs, and I'll see where the next holes need to be drilled. Valve cover drilled, tapped. All the holes are tapped and drilled. So let's see how this thing fits. Right, got one in. Perfect. Both line up. Awesome. Let's get this on the car. So this is what the MSD coils look like when they're mounted up on the valve cover itself. I think this looks great. It's super clean, and it keeps the spark plug wire super short, and the way they're positioned worked out really good. The spark plug wire is not leaning into the header at any given point. So if you shift these to one direction too much or the other, you get a problem of the spark plug wire starting to lean into the header. But now we got a gap on every single cylinder, which is exactly what I wanted. And they are elevated off the valve cover just enough, so that way there's some air underneath of it. It's not getting heat soaked from the valve cover itself. I think they come out really good. So we got all the plumbing done. The intercooler piping is on and it's tight, and this is what it looks like at its home. I love the fit. It's a nice tight fit, but it's not rubbing anything. I really dig having the blow off valve right here, really close to the throttle body. I really hope that increases our throttle response when you're on a boost and then lift and then get back in it. So overall, very much happy to see this thing together. I actually can't believe it. It seems like not that long ago we were just fabricating and putting a cage in, and now this motor is pretty much ready to fire. We got to go through a few little more things, securing the throttle cable. I got to work on that. Got to run through some checks, make sure all systems are working. Hook up a laptop to the PDMs, cycle the fans on and off, fuel pumps, make sure everything is good to go. For next episode, we're gonna start this thing up, we're gonna hear how it sounds, and just go through all the checks and balances of getting this thing from running on the lift itself to spinning a few laps in the parking lot.